It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now. We have, I understand, an eyewitness.
I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was at my allergist's office because my birthday was 3 days earlier. And I don't remember much except people like standing around with their mouths covered, and I remember seeing the towers on a TV with smoke coming out of it.
We've seen it from the front angle before, but not from this angle.
So on 9/11, when the attacks began, I was asleep in my apartment during my senior year of college. And I woke up, didn't bother to listen to any news, got ready, got in my car, drove to campus, stopped by my chemistry lab partner's dorm room, and told him, "Get ready, we got to get to class." And that's when he told me, well, a plane hit one of the towers in Manhattan and school's canceled for the day. I, of course, told him to stop shitting me, told him to get dressed, and we needed to go. And that was when he pointed to the TV screen, and I saw the smoke billowing out of one of the towers. And while I was watching it, the second plane came flying in and struck it. And that was when I knew that America had been under attack. I was blissfully ignorant until that point. I spent the rest of the day just staying on campus, listening to news, getting updates. I went to school in Pennsylvania, so when we heard about the plane, Flight 93, coming down in PA, it wasn't too far from where I was located. And when we found out that it had come down because the passengers stepped up and fought back, that made us intensely proud to be Americans at that moment. Now, what do I know about it? I know that it's probably the single greatest attack on civilian life in this country, and that it has forever altered, how we view terrorism, and it has given us the need to remain vigilant. And I feel like since it actually occurred in the last 2 decades, I feel like people have become detached from it. I know when it first happened, people on the West Coast weren't impacted nearly as much because it was thousands of miles away. And now people here on the East Coast have started to forget about it. We have entire new generations that it happened before they were born. And I think there's a sense of, well, it wasn't as big of a deal as people thought it was originally. And now, of course, we have the COVID pandemic, which I've actually heard some analysts comparing the impact and the death of COVID, comparing it to a 9/11 attack, which to me is a very apples to oranges comparison and shouldn't be made. But regardless of that, I feel like people are starting to forget, and I hope it doesn't take another terrorist attack for everyone to wake back up and remember that this is at least something we need to be concerned with.
I knew Osama bin Laden was a leader of Al-Qaeda, and he had been given weapons earlier in the 20th century by the United States. And he had orchestrated the attacks and had been pinpointed as the leader by the FBI.
All right, so, I know the basics about Osama bin Laden probably as much as everyone else knows that doesn't pay attention to the news or politics too much. I know he was behind it, and that they went after him George Bush started the wars and everything with that, and we went after him and eventually got him, 15 years later or whatever it may have been. Was he successful? Depends what if he wanted to cause terror and panic, then yes, and if he wanted to cause a long-lasting state of security and everything that he caused from that, then yes, I think he was successful in that way. Was he successful in tearing down America? No. Was he successful in causing mass panic and everyone to second guess several things for many, many years? Yes, so it depends what your term of success means, and also, I guess, what he did want to get out of it. So yes and no in that sense.
Well, what I know about Osama bin Laden is that he was the mastermind behind all this. As far as I know, I think it's funny that I think we helped him when Russians were fighting against Afghanistan. We were kind of aiding him or people that supported him. Do I think he was successful? A little bit. I mean, he paid for it with his life. Afghanistan suffered greatly, but because certain things, we can't go to Canada without a passport now. We have more delays at the airport. We have to go through so much security. There's so many security things that we go through now that we didn't used to. And if we had totally defeated him or the terrorists, that we would have been able to go back to life as it was. But when you're fighting a terrorist, you're not fighting a country. And you knew that when you're going to fight terrorists, it would take 20 years to fight terrorism, knowing what kind of commitment we would have. And it's been 20 years now, so yeah, we beat him, we killed him, but some of the ramifications of what happened still exist to this day.
Um, 9/11, I feel like just shows how much, like, no matter, our government is there to protect us, like, crazy things can happen. Like, that wasn't that far long ago, and that was like the craziest thing like any of us have seen in our lifetimes. Like, that didn't happen like in the 40s or 50s or anything. The biggest massacre in the United States was Pearl Harbor before that. And I feel like the war on terror is kind of like just a facade to like get oil out of the desert, you know?
All right, so 20 years later, we should think about 9/11 as a time of remembrance, and hopefully mostly just focusing on the people that died and were injured and the families that were impacted during that time. That's what we should be thinking about 9/11, not necessarily the bad that happened, but more of the people that were affected by it. And I guess the security issues and everything else that stemmed from that to make us safer in that fashion. The war on terror, I mean, I guess technically they're pulling out of everything now, so hopefully over to a point, and also hopefully successful to that other point. I mean, there's still stuff happening, and there's always going to be stuff happening. You can't deal with everything, but hopefully we've kind of mitigated, and hopefully nothing like 9/11 will ever happen again in any sense of that from there.
It was nothing like I'd ever seen any before in my life. I mean, I look back at 9/11, and I remember, like, my mother would remember when Kennedy was killed, or my grandparents when Pearl Harbor happened. That was my moment in my lifetime of tragedy.
Well, I'm more concerned about domestic terrorism now as opposed to foreign, because I feel like we're so hypersensitive to foreign terrorism that, like, we kind of turn a blind eye to, like, how many shootings and, like, I don't know, crazy things that happen within our country happen.
Well, I don't think that the country is better prepared at this point. In fact, we're weaker today than we were a year ago or 2 years ago. And we're susceptible to attack here in the United States, as well as at our bases in overseas locations, at our embassies, and worldwide. Is one more in danger than another? Well, that's hard to say, because our leadership is so weak at this point that the terrorists have been emboldened and they are likely to attack where they wouldn't have a few years ago. And so, is our country safer right now? No, it isn't.
All right, are we better prepared? Yes, because before 9/11 we never thought that anyone would be brazen enough to come and attack civilians on American soil. Now we know that that's not the case, and we've learned to not only be aware that it could happen, but we've learned that we need to be prepared. Again, I had mentioned previously about the existence of sky marshals, changes in airport security. The whole "if you see something, say something" campaign is all with respect to terrorist attacks. So I think that we are better prepared. Now, will that preparation fade as more and more time goes on? I certainly hope not, but I would say that at least right now, November 12th, 2021, we're better prepared than we were. Now, as far as the greater terrorist threat to the United States, whether it's foreign or domestic, I say hands down, without a doubt, we need to be worried about domestic terrorism more than anything outside of our country at this point. Of course, my take on it, people might not agree, but I feel like we have a domestic terrorist sitting in the White House right now. Most of Congress is made up of domestic terrorists. This whole campaign to defund the police and take away civilian protection, to me, is a terrorist act. A push to change the very fabric of our country to a socialist society is an attack on America. So I really do feel like domestic terrorism is hands down the bigger threat, and unfortunately that terrorism, in my opinion, is coming directly out of the US government right now.
I probably would be more concerned about domestic terrorism because I don't think we've had that foreign thing happen since then. I think when you go back to your other question, has things gotten better? There hasn't been that attack from somebody from outside the country since then. I don't even know if you call it terrorism. There's so many of these shootings and stuff that are going on, if you want to call it terrorism. I think there's so many, it would be such a shock, like Columbine is. But now when you hear something like there was a mass shooting, it's almost like, sadly, it's almost like something that it's not out of the ordinary anymore. So I don't know if you even want to call it terrorism, but the idea of mass shootings, that is kind of what is scary. It's scary, a lot of things from within.